So good morning. I'm just checking my mic here and I'm just going to give Councillor Harrison another minute or so. We think that he is coming. So we're just going to get started a little bit late, but I just wanted to advise on that. It's 9:30 now. We'll give him maybe 3 more minutes. Okay, thank you. So good morning and welcome. It's just 9:34, so we will commence the AWS board meeting of June 9th, 2022. First, the board recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. There's only 2 of us, so this could be interesting. So Mayor Main, can I have a motion for approval of the agenda? Moved by Mayor Main, seconded by Director Wallace. And are there any errors or omissions or comments? Nope, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. So adoption of the minutes, moved by Mayor Main, seconded by Director Wallace. Any comments? Nope, all in favor? Those are carried. Reports. So first off, I'd like to just inform that Ms. Belinda Wood sends her regrets today, and Ms. Chow will be filling in. And for reports on the agenda, if Ms. Chow could please present the report on the AWS operations update. Thank you.
Good morning to the board and members. The presentations will provide an update on the watershed, river, and rainfall, our AWS annual operations and maintenance activities, as well as the 2022 project updates. Watershed and rainfall updates. This slide shows the historical record of our snow pillow. The picture from the right is from this week. The gray band is minimum and maximum range. The blue line is 2022 records. The green is last year. The April and May snowfall this year put us over the average with the depth of snow currently at 1 meter. The average is about 0.6 meter. The snowpack melt has been delayed by 2 to 4 weeks due to the extended cooler weather in April and May. This slides provide the historical and current Arrowsmith Dam levels. The dam is overflowing with full capacity, 100%, doing pretty good for water supplies this year. This is our rainfall records. The minimum and maximum range is in gray band. The blue line is average monthly rainfall. The red line is our 2022 rainfall. April and May again is about average of 125 millimeter for April and 54 millimeter for May. So this slide is the Englishman River level records. River water level is at 0.2 to 0.5 meter higher than last year. Winter month, the river level is about 1.2 to 4.5 meters, commonly seeing a fluctuations of about 2 meters depending on the rainfall event. Moving on to our annual operations and maintenance activities. So generally consists of remove logs and debris from spillway and lake, inspect and repair log boom as required, paint the generator building, fill road potholes, clean and remove debris from ditch and drainage system, conduct monthly inspection, consistent piezometer readings. So those are our routine operations and maintenance activities. Our 2022 project. So this spending package consists of our camera security, communication device, solar power charging station, and piezometer unit. The camera security item, the selections for the camera is completed. We purchased the Starlink satellite communication system to increase the signal bandwidth. The current radio system will be used as backup. Power supply upgrade. The new camera draws more power than existing configuration, and we're in the process of assessing and selecting the solar system that is able to handle the demands. Piezometer unit, it has been purchased last year. Like everything else, we're experiencing long lead time. We should receive the item this month or thereabouts. So this one is the dam safety review. Request for proposal was issued last year and we received 7 proposals. We awarded the contract to Stantex for $75,000 and our budget is $100,000. The work will be carried out and extended over 2 years, completed in 2023, with the main component meeting the regulations, which consists of structural stability review, hazard and failure mode, hydrotechnical inflow design, and dam freeboard level, as well as the downstream inundated area review and dam record keeping and safety management. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. Does anyone have any questions for the delegation? And welcome. No, that's fine. Okay. Oh, but you made it anyway. So thank you. Great. It's okay. So does anyone have any questions regarding the presentation? Thank you. Thank you. So do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation to receive the report? Thank you, Mayor Main, seconded by Councillor Harrison. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Moving on the agenda, if Ms. Holmes, could you please present the report on the 2021 audited financial statements, and welcome, thank you.
Good morning. Our auditor from MMP sends his regrets and he was unable to be here today. Typically, he would present the statements, but I'll go through them with you and happy to receive any questions. And otherwise, you could contact Corey Vanderhorst directly if you did have any other questions with respect to the audit. Okay, so we're looking at our year ended December 31st, 2021 for Arrowsmith Water Service Joint Venture. We're going to go through the financial statements, a little bit of an overview, MNP's auditor's report. They've provided us with an audit findings letter, which you have a copy in front of you, as well as recommendations that are in the agenda package. So the first is just an excerpt from the balance sheet for AWS. And as expected, there's no change in the tangible capital assets, and the change in the joint ventures, it just relates to the difference between the contributions and actual expenses. Contributions that come from the joint ventures are based on budget, and then it gets adjusted at year end based on actual numbers. With respect to how costs are apportioned for the AWS, that's noted in the financial statements, and the capital costs, administrative and maintenance expenses are apportioned about 64% to the city of Parksville, about 14% to Qualicum Beach, and about 22% to the regional district of Nanaimo. Operational costs, on the other hand, are based on the share of water that's taken from the Englishman River between the city of Parksville and the regional district. This is an excerpt from the statements that you have copies of, just with respect to our statement of operations and accumulated surplus. Operations quite similar to the prior year. As Heidi already suggested, the dam safety review is coming up in this year, which was budgeted in last year. So that was about the only significant difference from what had been budgeted, and no kind of extraordinary costs above and beyond. The difference there between the total expenses of $106,900 and the total joint venture contributions of $136,900 is a $30,000 contribution that goes towards reserves for dam replacement and forward-looking costs on that. What I would suggest on that is, as we're all moving forward in our asset management journeys, as well as looking at natural assets, those kind of reserve contributions may be updated and may require more or less, just depending on what we're kind of estimating and seeing as we work through some of those asset management values and replacement costs. So that would be something we would bring back to the board as we do that work. With respect to the audit opinion, the auditors didn't have any issues with the audit and will be issuing a clean audit opinion following your acceptance of the financial statements today. What I will note with respect to the AWS statements is that the audit opinion is a little bit different than what you would see at your municipal financial statement presentation, and that it is prepared specifically in accordance with our joint venture agreement. And the purpose of the financial statements is to provide those numbers to each of the municipalities to pick up their proportionate share. So it's a little bit different. It doesn't look quite the same as a regular audit opinion. What they do is they say it is in accordance with the financial reporting framework that they're asked to report on. And so in the statements, note 1 describes what that is. And it basically just says, we're preparing these statements for the municipalities to use in picking up their share of the joint venture, which is standard accounting practice. You'll note in the audit findings letter that MNP provided you, which you've got a copy of here. On page 1, they just give you an update on the engagement status, which really just says it's complete except for the board's approval of the statements today. And then they ask management that has prepared the statements to sign a representation letter, which we'll do as well. And then they'll provide us at that point with the clean audit report that isn't marked draft. And then just to finalize on that, they also kind of check in on what the audit service plan and what the final materiality was. For AWS, the materiality was $200,000, and then they use about a $4,200 amount just in doing some of the testing. Again, the operations of AWS are quite straightforward, so it's not a comprehensive statistical analysis for them in their audit work, but they do like to report out on that so that the magnitude of dollars that they were looking at. The other thing they've noted is that they didn't detect any circumstances of fraud or any suspected fraud. So that's in your audit findings report. And so just finally, the recommendations per the agenda, and that I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Holmes? Failing that, I just had one question regarding the breakdown of the RDN contribution. So I think you mentioned 22%. Just to confirm, that breakdown is only between areas E and G. Is that correct? Or is that also, how does that work? Sorry, I guess my question should be more broad. What is the breakdown of the 22% within the apportionment?
So I think that that's based on the agreement, the original agreement, that proportionment, and then the actual operational costs are based on the measurement of water that is used by either party, the RDN or the City of Parksville. So water staff provides us with that. So there's kind of two different calculations that are done there. But the original amounts, let me just go back to that slide. This one here, that's per the agreement that was in place now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think that we could probably address it at the point on the agenda when we talk about the agreement then.
Yeah, sure.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So if there are no further questions, do I have a motion to receive number one? Thank you, Mayor Main, seconded by Scott Harrison. Thank you. All in favor? Approved, carried, thank you. And recommendation number two, that the Arrowsmith Water Service Joint Venture 2021 audited financial statements be approved. Moved by Scott Harrison, seconded by Mayor Main. We should get faster at this, right? All in favor? Carried, thank you.
Thank you. We'll have these recommendations forwarded to the auditor, and then the final audit of financial statements will be provided to the municipalities.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Moving on the agenda to our next report, and if Mr. Murray Walters could please present the draft AWS joint venture agreement.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. I didn't prepare anything for this. I just wanted to give you some background on why we got to where we are and what the differences are with the current agreement over the one that expired a couple of years ago. So the joint venture agreement in structure hasn't changed materially in any fashion for the AWS. What it has done is receive some modernized legal language and cleaned up some stuff that was, in the lawyer's view, far more complicated than it needed to be for a mature joint venture. So there's quite a few changes that we'll talk about when we get to the ERWS agreement, but there's very few changes in the AWS one. Again, it's just a modernizing of the legal language, the shares and the partnership and the description of assets and all that stuff is all exactly the same as it was before. But if you have any specific questions, I'll have a go at answering them.
Thank you. Yep, Mayor, go ahead.
Just so I understand this, this new agreement now goes from 3-member committee to a 4-member committee. Two from Parksville, 1 from the region, 1 from Qualicum Beach.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is a relatively significant change to the agreement from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that was so long ago. I've forgotten about that one, but I guess that reflects, or it's intended to reflect the ownership of shares in the joint venture.
Not arguing
Yeah.
the point of it. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
I understood it.
Yep. You're
Yep.
correct. Yeah.
You have
Thank you. And my earlier question about the included areas of the RDN.
Yeah.
Is that, as I believe it was Schedule C,
Mhm.
and you're at a disadvantage not having all these pages in
Oh,
front of you,
I've got it
sorry,
over there.
but
I've looked at it enough.
right, so I see it here on page 42 of the
Yeah.
agenda package, and that's the answer to my question, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought I had seen it, but earlier I hadn't clued in, so that's great. Does anyone have any further questions for Mr. Walters? Oh,
Kiva.
thank you, go ahead.
If I may, through the chair, just wanted to point out that another change that's being proposed is that there also be alternate members for this. for the board so that if a member is unable to attend, the quorum would remain at 4 and you would send an alternate. And so that's a bit of a operational change from how we currently do this. board.
Pre-assigned, sorry, Chair. Pre-assigned alternates. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Kaler. Can I just ask a question about the alternate model then? So the RDN already has an alternate process in place. So that is what you're referring to, or would the chair of the RDN appoint an alternate?
If I may, through you, to you, it would really be up to the individual members' process. So some members would be approved by their board or their council, and I know the RDN has a different alternate model for directors. So we're not dictating what that would be. So each member will decide how to appoint their alternates, but they would be identified in advance so we could provide them with the materials just in case they did have to cover for the main member.
Great, thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you, Mr. Walters.
You're welcome.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. The speaker's note suggested that. So on item number 4, do I have a mover for the first recommendation that the report be received? Mr. Harrison, seconded by Mayor Main. All in favor? Carried. Do I have a mover for the recommendation that the Arrowsmith Water Service Management Board approve the Arrowsmith Water Services Joint Venture Agreement, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2027, as attached in its Appendix A, moved by Mayor Main, seconded by Councillor Harrison. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And finally, do I have a mover that the Arrowsmith Water Service Management Board seek approval from their respective councils and boards to approve the Arrowsmith Water Service Joint Venture Agreement, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2027, moved by Mr. Harrison, seconded by Mayor Main. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. On the agenda, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business from the previous meeting? I don't believe so. And moving down the agenda, new business. Do we have new business? No, we do not. Moving on. Is there anyone present that wishes to provide comment? I do not see anyone, so no comments were received prior to this meeting also. And do I have a mover and for adjournment? Mayor Main, Harrison, all in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
All right, that's fine. Oh, yeah. Kiva. For now anyways, until we get this back to normal. That's how we keep you away from the microphone. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's a call from Bay Roberts, Newfoundland, so we know what that's about.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's we have 9:55. We'd like to proceed if we could. All those present that need to be present, so we'll carry on. So good morning and welcome to the June 9th, 2022 ERWS board meeting. The board recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. Like to have approval of the agenda, please. At this time, do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Director Rogers and Director Wallace seconded. Thank you so much. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I just thought you were lifting your hand, Director Rogers. No, okay. Proceed with the adoption of the minutes. For the minutes of the Englishman River Water Service Management Board meeting held November 17th, 2021 and December 13th, 2021. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Mayor Main moved, seconded by Director Wallace, that the recommendation of the Englishman River Water Service Management Board meeting held November 17th, 2021 and December 13th, 2021 be adopted. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. For reports now, we have a report from Ms. Chow. If you would please present your report on the ERWS operations for the operations update, if you would. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this presentation will provide an update on the ERWS treatment plant operations, maintenance, optimization, water consumption and production, as well as our 2022 project updates. Routine operations and maintenance works, mainly upkeep with our water productions and demand. Twice a year, complete deep cleaning of the strainers, increase the frequency of the filtration membrane cleans during high activity events, clean out the silt and buildup from the intake chamber in the summer. Complete our monthly inspections of the chemical skid and spill containment, conduct chemical drawdown to confirm the pump efficiency, service the equipment from analyzer, valve, pump, to compressor. So those are our operations and maintenance routine works. Moving on to upcoming optimization work. Optimizing SCADA programming to allow the plant to run continuously. Currently, it is on and off mode based on the reservoir level instead of following the demand pattern. Install analyzer to automate the coagulant dosing. This will eliminate the lab work and manual dosing required after hours. Develop a maintenance program using condition assessment and reliability principle. Currently, it's based on the O&M manual requirement, which are time-based. Water productions and consumption. So in terms of production, the orange line is water treatment plant production. The brown line on top is well water. The treatment plant is producing 10 to 12,000 cubic meter a day in the summer and 4 to 6,000 in the winter. The well system is producing 2 to 4,000 cubic meter a day in the summer and 1 to 2,000 in the winter. Water consumption. The blue line is the city's consumption, and the purple at the bottom is RDN. The city is drawing 10 to 12,000 cubic meter per day in the summer and 4 to 6 in the winter, 4 to 6,000 in the winter. The RDN uses 3 to 4,000 cubic meter in the summer and 1,000 in the winter. Our 2021 and 2022 project update. The Geobag project is now in operation. Testing, commissioning, and training was carried out early this year in April. Daily and weekly lab tests will continue to confirm the system performance. A picture of the before and after Geobag sampler are shown there. The system optimization is in the work, which include additional lab tests to reduce the polymer use and purchase one bag with double layer on our next bag purchase. SCADA monitoring and programming spending package. So this fund is used toward our in-house SCADA engineer and contractor as part of the next step in optimizing the system. It's on budget and on time for this work. Professional technical consulting services spending package. This funding is used toward retaining engineer to automate the membrane cleans and coagulant dosing. Retain environmental consultant to monitor and ensure the use and handling of chemicals and waste flow meets the regulations. Retain SCADA network security contractor to assess and ensure adequate firewall and measure are in place to prevent security breach. Our critical spare parts. We purchased spare parts, chemical rated pipe, valve, analyzer, variable frequency drives, and pumps. It's proven to be working as we had used and changed out one of our instruments. However, we are experiencing long lead time for getting all the parts on the list in place this year due to supply shortage. Our railway crossing and SRW agreement with ICF and SVI. The design for the crossing is in the work. We spent $20,000 for the design. We're looking to tender in construction this fall or winter. The application for the SRW agreement is to follow thereafter with ICF and SVI. Our preventative maintenance program. We reach out to various vendors and engineers to determine what services and devices are commonly used for condition assessment, testing, pump vibration monitoring. Computer software was also considered and reviewed. A request for proposal will be issued later this year to cover our mechanical HVAC process, instrumentation, and control equipment. We recently retained an electrical service contractor with the upcoming work included UPS testing, inspection and service of transformer, automatic transfer switch, high voltage electrical kiosk testing, and those are the works with the electrical service contractor. Our intake structure safety fence. We awarded the work to Mid-Island Fencing for $12,000. Construction is scheduled for this fall at our intake. Water Supply Resiliency Plan. A grant application will be submitted for the Water Supply Resiliency Plan and any construction that may require. The studies are for possible water sources and resources that can be accessible and activate during emergency, as well as reviewing the assumption made in the existing long-term water supply plan. If approved, the work is to review both reliable and possible water supply sources to respond to climate change and emergency event. The RFP will be issued later this year. If grant funding is limited, the review of the existing water supply plan will remain as optional item and to be presented to the board for consideration at a later date. Our 5-year fish monitoring program. The work was awarded to EDI. The next step is to install the turbidity meter upstream and downstream of the intake. Our biologists will be carrying out the field work in July or August. The province funded a portion of the steelhead snorkeling survey this year of $23,000. The remaining $12,000 will be funded by ERWS. So far, so good. All the items are in place. We're working and sharing our data with BC Conservation Foundation folks as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chow. Is there any questions for Ms. Chow? Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding the routine maintenance versus turbidity events that you mentioned. You had a slide with the brown background. I think that one, sure, so that would work. Anyways, here's my question. Are we operating the plant with any sort of metrics that determine at a certain point of turbidity that we shut down the plant to reduce the amount of coagulant needed to treat the water because it is highly turbid? Or does the turbidity events that continue to occur from mostly high rainfall or slides that are happening along the river, is that just part, do we just continue to operate the plant anyway?
If I may, through the chair, the plan is designed to handle turbidity up to 100 NTU. So we, because during the warranty period, we want to maintain, operate the plant up to that to prove it out. But once the warranty is completed, we'll look after a different strategy. It may be that we shut down and then wait it out a day or two and use our well water.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. That's good news. And do we have an understanding of how many times we've hit that limit since the plant has been in operation?
Through the chair, we do, but I don't have that exact number. I would say probably twice a year.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Yao, for your report. Thank you very much. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the presentation from Heidi Chow, anyways, regarding the Englishman River Water Service Operation Update be received for information? Moved by Director Wallace, seconded by Director Rogers. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you so much. We have another report now from Ms. Holmes. If you would, there you are, you're quick. Snuck up there. Please present your report on the 2021 audited financial statements, if you would, please, Ms. Holmes.
Great. Good morning again. We'll go through this one again. MNP sends their regrets to not be here today, and I can provide any contact information for them if you have any direct questions for them, but otherwise I'll walk through the statements. So these are the statements for the Englishman River Water Service Joint Venture for the year ended December 31st, 2021. We'll go through some of the financial statement highlights through MNP's auditor's report, some highlights from their audit findings letter, as well as the recommendations that are per the agenda. Here's an excerpt from the statement of financial position. And as expected, ERWS really just has the tangible capital asset and joint venture accumulated surplus. All of the accounting is run through City of Parksville's books. So this represents the net tangible capital assets for the joint venture. There's a small increase in tangible capital assets this year, and we'll go through the details of that. Similar to the AWS, the costs are proportioned between the City of Parksville and the Regional District of Nanaimo. And anything related to the Springwood transmission line, which was part of the ERWS construction, is 100% Parksville. And so it's a 74% for City of Parksville and 26% for the Regional District. And operational costs are shared based on the share of water used from the Englishman River for the RDN. And this year that was 27.8% of the water. And so costs are proportioned for operations based on that percentage. The statement of operations and joint venture accumulated surplus, again, showing a significant increase in costs of about $230,000 this year. And really that represents kind of a full year operational and getting up to speed with all of our maintenance and fully staffed as compared to the prior year, which we were still really just getting going on that. Most of that increase is in wages and in supplies. And you'll see that on our expenses listed there. The joint venture contributions are based on the original budget and then adjusted to actuals at the end of the year. There's no contribution to reserves reflected in this year end, but if you'll recall, in this year's 2022 budget is when we're starting to make some contributions to reserves. So we'll see that in next year's financial statements. The other thing that I'll point out, and this is really to provide for each of the joint ventures in the original agreement, the town of Qualicum Beach did have an original amount of about $100,000 from 2010, 2011, very early costs. And so right now those costs of those original contributions are apportioned to each of RDN and City of Parksville in accordance with accounting practice. But we do continue to track it in case Qualicum Beach was ever to be involved again. This year, with respect to the tangible capital asset additions, Heidi made reference to the Geobag project, which is finishing up in 2022, but we did have approximately $234,000 of costs in 2021. And then there were some final costs with respect to the construction of the water treatment plant and the river intake, which was a water pump and pressure transmitter that was an additional item in 2021. There was also some final costs on Springwood transmission line, and again, that relates to Parksville only. This is just a final summary of the tangible capital assets and how they're apportioned. What I'll point out to you with respect to the nature of these statements is each of those municipalities or local governments picks up those capital assets and records them in their own statements in accordance with the proportion that they paid. And then they record the amortization on those assets in their financial statements. So in the ERWS statements, there's no amortization on the tangible capital assets shown. And so this is a statement that we prepare for the ease of the municipal financial statements to be prepared. Just showing that the accumulated surplus is about nearly $42.8 million now, which is equivalent to the amount of the tangible capital assets. With respect to MNP's audit statement, they're in a position to give us a clean audit opinion. Again, I'll note that these statements are prepared specifically in accordance with the joint venture agreement, which may be different from what we see with other local government financial statements. And that's governed by what is noted in note 1 of the financial statements, which states that they're prepared in accordance with the joint venture statement, that amortization is not recorded. So that's not typically something you would see in a regular audit report, but these are a special purpose financial statement and the audit opinion is given on that basis. With respect to the engagement status, which is noted in your audit findings report, MNP is in a position to issue their audit report once they receive the acceptance and approval of the financial statements by the management board, and they're in a position to issue a clean audit opinion. And just finally, with respect to significant audit and accounting matters with respect to the audit, There were no deviations from their audit service plan, and they used a materiality of 1.2 million with respect to the statement of financial position and $40,000 for the statement of operations. And that just gives you some idea of the magnitude at which they're reviewing transactions above that amount. And then they also do some statistical sampling. They did not find any instances of fraud or any suspected fraud during their audit procedures. So those are the recommendations per the agenda, and I'm happy to take any questions about the statements if you have them.
Are there any questions for Ms. Holmes at this time? Director Wallace.
Thank you. And through you to Ms. Holmes, the amortization comment made, how does the amortization of the grant funding that was received for the building of the facility play into that? Is the grant funding, I believe, was received by the city of Parksville, which would have purchased the capital assets, which are now being divided amongst Parksville and the RDN. Can you clarify that what I just said is how it's happening?
Right. So the funding is not amortized. The funding is recognized when it's received related to the asset spending that was done in the year. So that the grant funding is reflected in those accumulated surplus numbers. And then in each of the municipalities, that would be reflected in their investment in the joint venture. And then the assets are amortized based on expected life determined by that municipality.
Right. So just to clarify, then it could be stated that Nanus did receive a portion of the grant. And I'm not sure the website reflects that. I think it says the city of Parksville. So that's where my question is coming from. And so I think that's important information that as we move forward on figuring out water systems in Oceanside and whatnot, that Nanus did in effect receive a grant for their portion of this facility then. That's a correct statement.
Yeah, through the chair, sorry. Yeah, I'll go and look at that verbiage because certainly Parksville received the funding physically, but it was proportioned out as we do on the statements as to each person's or each municipality's share. So I'll take a look at that just to make sure it's clear that that wasn't kind of 100% that went to Parksville. It was shared proportionately. City of Parksville just administered it on behalf of,
Thank you. And Director Rogers.
Yeah, and just I think with respect to those grants, there was more than the one grant. There was the grant that allocated to Parksville, and then there was a smaller grant that was split between the two partners based on the percentage of the agreement. So those were all recognized, at the time when come in there. So there's no doubt that the part of the one grant went to the RDN with respect to Area E.
yeah, through the chair. That's right. There were multiple grants that were proportioned accordingly.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions at this point? Thank you very much, Ms. Holmes, for your
Thank you.
report. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the Englishman River Water Service Joint Venture Audit Findings Letter and the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021, as presented be received for information, as well as that the Englishman River Water Service Joint Venture 2021 audited financial statements be approved? Do I have a mover and a seconder for those? Mayor Main moved, seconded by Director Wallace. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you so much. Following under reports, we have Mr. Walters. If you would please present the draft ERWS joint venture agreement for consideration, if you may.
That's on now. So thank you. There's a few more items of interest in this agreement than there was in the AWS conversation. So again, first and foremost, we are modernizing the legal language in the agreement. So there's a bunch of changes with respect to that that are obvious when you read it, but they don't really mean much to most non-lawyers. Some of the big things that were changed in that agreement this time around was a general move from an agreement that describes the acquisition and construction of a facility to an agreement that covers the operation and ongoing maintenance of a facility. So there's a bit of a change in the structure of the agreement that way. There's a change in the way that the the board of the ERWS is set up. Instead of having 4 representatives, it should only have 3 moving forward. That'll be 2 from the city of Parksville representing their majority and 1 from the RDN, which is a rough approximation of the split that's actually there financially. I guess there's the other thing that was changed a little bit there, which you may or may not have noticed, is at the time when this project was put together and the city of Parksville built their Top Bridge Reservoir, there was an agreement with the regional district Area E to contribute to the construction of that in return for a designation that a portion of the contents of that reservoir were available for Area E as water storage, primarily for firefighting purposes. And between our 2 organizations, we seem to have lost that agreement from whenever it was made. So we added it into this one so that it's recorded properly. And you'll note in the appendix that the share of that reservoir is not the same amount as the ERWS split. It's a little less, I think 13%. That's one thing. We didn't change the splits on how the money was divided or how we were going to pay for capital between the 2 joint venture partners. It just was really hard to discern that split from the language that was used in the previous agreement. So as I think it showed up in Jenna's presentation, but the capital costs and things like that are split on the 74-26%. But the operating costs, administration costs, and all that maintenance costs are split on split by the amount of water that each party uses. And that's a same arrangement, but much simpler to understand in the agreement now. The other important change in the agreement is in the definitions, you'll see reference to something called operating guidelines. And that is to a document that we have yet to produce, which is just going to be a sort of day-to-day, this is how we want to cooperate between the 2 operating departments of the joint ventures to make sure that we're communicating appropriately and meeting each other's expectation around how much water we are producing and how much water we're using. So that, to me, as an operator, is going to be one of the key features of this moving forward. I think we'll all forget about the agreement quite quickly after we get through it, but that document is going to sort of guide our week-to-week operations between the 2 groups. And then there was one other thing. I think we changed some language around that it used to say or we'd like to change the language that says the chair of the ERWS board will direct the management committee to run the facilities, whatnot. We're going to change that to the board will direct the management committee. So it's a small change, but I think a worthwhile one. That is all the points I had with respect to the changes in the agreements. Some big, some small.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walters. Is there any questions at this time? Director Wallace, if you may.
Thank you, Chair. So having reviewed the agreement, I'm wondering if a simple bulk water agreement was considered between the city of Parksville and Area E of the RDN.
No.
Why not?
It never really came up, honestly, but I think we could talk about doing a simple bulk water agreement, but it's going to get quite complicated because in order to get to a bulk water agreement, the city is going to have to buy the RDN out, which is going to trigger a bunch of the other clauses in the agreement. I mean, it would work, I guess, if we wanted to go that way. If we had direction, we could make that work, but I don't see any impetus to do that. I think, we're better off cooperating with each other and trying to help each other out on a day-to-day, well-communicated basis than we are sticking to, you shall have 1 cubic meter of water today kind of thing. But yeah, we could go that way if that was the will of the group.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. A good segue. I'm wondering why the operational agreement doesn't form part of this agreement. I think that for me, that was one of the areas that I identified going through the agreement, that just to have the agreement and then not have the day-to-day operations of how the agreement is executed. Is that normal protocol that one come before the other, or was there a specific conversation regarding not including the operational agreement as in reference to this agreement?
I think the number one answer to that question is we don't want to have an operating guideline document that we have to come back to the board to get approval to change. This is a document that we need to be able to use between the City of Parksville's operating group and the RDN's operating group on a daily basis, maybe even more frequently, particularly in times of crisis. We need to be able to adjust that based on what we learned this week for next week, how we communicate, whether we're going to do it with phone calls, whether, you know, it's going to be a weekly thing. It's just, it's a really hands-on procedural document that just sort of determines how we're going to communicate and react to each other's needs. And I think it would be really cumbersome if we had to go back to the board and get the agreement adjusted every time we wanted to make a change to that.
Yes, thank you. Like more of an it's an operational it's an like a policy for operations as opposed to an agreement.
Completely. I think maybe even policy is too strong of a word for it, but yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Rogers.
Yeah, and I think earlier, Mr. Walters did reference that the parties are still working on that operational agreement and so on, and that it's necessary that that thing evolve as the facilities, the intakes and the treatment plant and so on, as that part of the ERWS aspects evolve and there's more learning curves and more new and better ways and so on, and best management practices to go with it. So yeah, I'm comfortable that it's the way it is, that it's being worked on.
Thank you. And I'll have a question here if I would, Mr. Walters. Speaking of the cooperation in between the Area E and Parksville, you mentioned anyways originally that the Top Bridge Reservoir is back in the contract, is being consideration as being provision for Area E and so forth, which is good planning. In the event of a catastrophic failure of the WTP, the water treatment plant and so forth, taking out of the Englishman River, is there means and mechanisms in place anyways whereby the City of Parksville would be able to share the Springwood well reservoir or well system anyways that we have with our Area E partner, or how would that work? I'm suggesting if the Englishman River ceased to be the source at that particular time for whatever reason, and then do we have a mechanism in place? I recognize that the system loops, there's a loop in place with Springwood here, but the thing is that is there any consideration that we have in order to, if there was a commitment to supply to Area E, can we back it up or share a portion of the Springwood reservoirs? Or is it strictly the agreement with Englishman River water supply?
So technically the agreement's just on the ERWS water supply, technically. So I guess you could extend that to if it's in that reservoir, we can use a portion of it, I suppose. But operationally, I think if either party had a crisis, we would obviously bend over backwards to help move water back and forth between there. But it's not, there's words written into the agreement to say that, you know, in case of a significant crisis, you know, the RDN will make every attempt to provide water back to Parksville if required, and vice versa. So that's in the agreement. The specifics, though, we chose to not write those in there because it's when those things happen and we need to be able to make decisions between the people with their hands on the valves. You know, I think we've got the commitment from both parties to help each other out, and we've got pretty good interconnection between the two systems. I mean, if Top Bridge Reservoir is in operation, it's pretty easy to get water to Area E. If Top Bridge Reservoir is not in operation, it's still possible. It's not great, but we could still wheel water from Parksville through the distribution system into our system if we had to, and vice versa. Almost all the water in the RDN Area E system can get into the City of Parksville system in a fairly straightforward and quick fashion. We don't have a lot of water, but it can go both ways. So.
Thank you. And that is answers my questions that there is an agreement of reciprocity anyways in between the two organizations. I say catastrophic, you know, if a major storm event took out the Englishman River and it managed to recourse itself, and move itself completely. Well, it happens in other
Yeah.
parts of Canada. It's seen some bad reports, but anyways. And then all of a sudden the intake is in a bad location where there's no river. So that's what I'm saying. And our partners anyways in Area E still require river for their own commitment. So I just wanted to make sure that we have some reciprocity anyways built into it. It seems to be there. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Director Wallace, further question.
Yes, thank you. I have a question regarding Schedule B, where it shows the denoted area by a blue border of the Nanoose Bay Peninsula Water Service. And it includes the golf course, but it's my understanding the golf course is on groundwater wells. And so the map, is that correct? I'm wondering, so Schedule B.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my question is this, why does the area denoted by the blue border include the golf course if ERWS is not a supply to the golf course?
So that map denotes the Nanoose Bay Peninsula bulk water system, water service area incompleteness. And, you know, the boundaries don't exclude the golf course. The golf course isn't a customer, although we provide potable water to the clubhouse. So we don't provide any irrigation water to the golf course, period. Don't even have a connection. So, yeah, I don't know if there's another answer to that question, but there's no ability for them to access our potable water supply for irrigation there.
Thank you.
Sorry, Director, sorry, Mayor Main.
Don't be sorry. No
Carry
problem
on.
at all. I just have a question here. I've read it over a couple times. I've not seen any reference to administration costs incurred by the or billed to the region from the city, much in the same as the region bills Parksville administration costs on all the invoices. Is it taken care of in here or is it addressed in here by any stretch?
I think the administration costs are listed in the same clause that splits the maintenance and operating costs. So we pay our share of the administration costs based on how much water we use, I believe. If that's what you were referring to.
No, sorry. Every invoice that we receive from the region, there's the price of even though we do pay our share of the administration, the actual physical administration costs at the regional offices, but we also pay a 10% upcharge on all invoices to cover our costs or cover the region's costs. And I'm just wondering if we have the same situation here.
I'm not aware of that mechanism. Maybe.
I can ask
you
for
help?
Yes, if we could maybe ask for Ms. Holmes for clarification, if she could help with that reply.
Sure, thanks through the chair. So typically the RDN does not bill us an administrative fee on these types of cost sharing arrangements, and we don't charge the RDN on this related to their share of the costs. So they share the administrative costs of the ERWS, but we don't then charge them an administrative fee on top of that.
Okay, I realize we haven't done that to this point. I'm asking, do we have the ability to do that in the future? And yes, they do charge us if they send us an invoice for the park, for example, for our parks, for the work that they do. They give us that plus a 10% administration charge over and above.
But not on any kind of our shared costs. So for example, all of our solid waste costs or other types of cost sharing where we have an agreement in place to share the actual costs of these, there aren't administrative fees charged either way on those agreements. So that would be a new item if we were to do it in this case. Basically, we take the costs of the actual activity, whether it's the RDN is running that activity or City of Parksville is running that activity. We don't then charge an administrative
Okay.
fee on top of that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Therefore, we're moving on. Mr. Walters, thank you very much for your presentation. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that the report from the Englishman River Water Service Management Committee dated June 9th, 2022, entitled Englishman River Water Service joint venture agreement draft for consideration be received. Number 2, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board approve the Englishman River Water Services Joint Venture Agreement, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2027, as attached as per Appendix A. And number 3, that the Englishman River Water Service Management Board seek approval from their respective council and board to approve the Englishman River Water Service Joint Venture Agreement, July 1st, 2022 to June 3rd, 30th, 2027. I have a mover and a seconder on that. Director Rogers moved. Do I have a seconder? And Mayor Main seconded that. Thank you so much. All those in favor? Oh, sorry.
My apologies.
I-
If I may,
CAO on my right.
thank you. I
has
should have said in
comment.
front. Sorry if I may, we just were seeking some clarification. There was that minor change on the language. Is it acceptable to the board that we adopt the agreement as amended? As Director Walters, I'm not sure if Murray's discussion about the item referring to 5.2H, and then there was a couple of typos. Is the board agreeable to adopting the agreement with that amendment?
Certainly. So if we can amend that, if the board is agreeable to adopting the amendment as amended, as per the new contract. If the board is in agreement with that, do I once again have a mover and a seconder for that? Director Rogers and Mayor Main, thank you so much. All those in favor? Opposed? Would be, if it's unanimous, probably no opposing. Thank you so much for that. Carrying right along. Is there any unfinished business? Anybody wants to bring forth from the floor? I see none. We're moving on to under new business. We have Director Wallace has a review of assumptions motion, if you would please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to move that the ERWS Board direct the City of Parksville staff to include as part of the 2022 Water Resiliency Study, a review and update of the assumptions made with respect to climate change and population growth in the original ERWS design and 2050 long-term plan.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Mayor Main. Director Wallace. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this motion is to clarify with, while we are in the operational gap of which mechanism, the City of Parksville or the RDN conducts the work. We received the report earlier today that shows that we are on track for this planning process. I wanted to ensure that this important adjustment or input to the plan is included and to anchor the motion, the language in the motion anchors it to the 2050 long-term plan. So that what we have discussed in this committee multiple times is what about climate change? How much water do we have? Do we have enough? What is the capacity of the reservoir? Is it enough to get us through another heat dome? These are all the questions we've been circling around. And so that is the purpose of me bringing this motion forward, is for the language to clarify who will be conducting the work and then where the work will land. And that is the 2050 plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair O'Brien. I like the motion. I would just like to propose a slight amendment to it. With respect to climate change, so the wording would say a review and update of the assumptions made with respect to climate change, population growth, and per capita water usage in the original ERWS design and 2050 long-year plan.
Are you proposing a friendly amendment to that?
Yeah, that's what said, amend this motion to include and per capita water usage.
Right. We have agreement from the,
I'll second the amendment.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just make a friendly amendment and then just carry on as long as Director Mayor Main and Director Rogers or Wallace is in agreement. Fair enough. Okay. Any further questions or comments on this? Okay, I have a couple here. My concern is as you can see anyways on the agenda, that there's another motion coming forth that I'm putting forward. I'm concerned that this is just yet another study that is going to be reviewing the population growth and everything else that's in it, whereby it's going to talk about water resiliency and so forth. But the thing is that this is another study that we're actually directing our City of Parksville staff to include as part of their resiliency study, whereby I feel that it would be more appropriate at this time to just we recognize the fact that we are already in a climate change emergency, and we are also running into rapid and immediate growth in both Area E and City of Parksville. And so I would think that I would prefer it to actually move forward on to a consultant, going to a direct consultant to provide for resiliency in the highest form, which is to provide water storage in the location, possibly Highland. But to have that report actually, the resiliency report actually go to a qualified consultant to maybe suggest design and come up with ideas anyways for us to have more water storage in place. And so I feel that this would be redundant if we should just instead move ahead forward and go ahead with having the water storage plan considered. Director Rogers was first, then Mayor.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments on that, Director O'Brien, but I think it's more essential that we look at some of the assumptions that were made in the original work that was done with respect to ERWS. It's also important to just get a better handle on some specific climate change matters that have affected, and also with respect to the population growth. We know there's significant growth, as demonstrated by the 2021 census, but that isn't uniform everywhere, and also projections on where it may go from there. Yesterday, as part of the RDN workshop on the regional growth strategy and so on, there's some different projections in there relative to growth. And we know that in Area E, the population growth has not moved ahead as fast as it was projected at the time of the original studies. And in a big way, because there hasn't been development within the Fairwinds and the Lakes District and so on that was projected. So I think addressing what's referenced here in Director Wallace's motion and recommendation are all valid things for us to do and move forward with. And the motions and the recommendations do not in any way prevent that water resiliency study and so on being conducted by qualified and professional staff and consultants. So I'm comfortable with the way the very slightly amended motion is now, and we'll be supporting it. Thank you.
And Mayor May.
Thank you. I will also be supporting this motion. I think it's far more important for us to need to know what's going on and what is projected to go on before we start looking at the design and building of reservoirs. We don't even know if we need them at this point in time. The argument about rapid growth, I argue that adamantly. We've grown at a growth rate of 1.2% per year over the last 5 years. That's not rapid growth. That's actually very little growth in the area. There is, even if where we're at right now, we are well below where we were projected to be when this whole treatment plant was being contemplated. The numbers were way above where we are right now. And so we haven't even got to those numbers, let alone surpass them to the point where we need to go beyond that as far as growth goes. So in my mind, I think we need to get the numbers before we make any other plans and go any further with anything. And that would be my opinion on it. So as I said, I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Main. Just for your comments anyways, you're suggesting it's 1.2 growth over the last 5 years, and that's a relatively low growth factor. But I'm considering the fact that what the growth factor has been over the last 2 years, instead of taking the previous 3 years as well into that, I would guess that it would be far higher than 1.2%. We know the numbers that are coming to town with their building permits, and that's the only way that we have of gauging accurately what's going on. So that's my comment on that. The fact is that we already realize that we're already in a climate change emergency that has been proven time and time again. But the thing is that with the water storage reservoir plan, it also allows for using direct pipe system anyways into the water treatment plant, which would alleviate so many of the turbidity issues that would Director Wallace has mentioned anyways, asking about turbid events and so forth, that necessitated, of course, the addition of the Geobag and so forth. That anyways is to take that by having a high water storage, and the conduit would be actually directly into the back of the WTP, and would eliminate using the Englishman River as the conduit. And that is the issue here. Is the fact is the Englishman River is a poor conduit, and it's not reliable. And so much because we're relying totally on Mother Nature and the elements and so forth as to what that flow is going to look like. So the idea of having storage is to have an accurate stored system to take that water, the storm water, and set it off aside anyways. So it's there when we need it, and it's in a much purer form, and it's not subject to the elements anyways to rely on it. So that is my question on that. Comment, Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Walters had his hand up, and I'm wondering if he could speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on what the assumptions are and the plan sort of that's referenced in this motion. So the planning that was done to support the construction of the dam, the Arrowsmith Dam, and the follow-up with the ERWS system to supply water to Parksville and Nanoose, a tremendous amount of study work was done at that time that looked at the amount of water supply that was available and the demand that was there in the city of Parksville and in Area E in Nanoose. It also looked at population projections, looking all the way up to 2050, and how that demand matched up with the supply that was, sort of zeroed in on when they decided to build the dam on Arrowsmith Lake. So that plan is a very, very robust plan. And I would say here that for a community the size of Parksville and the size of Nanoose Area E, it's an extremely granular and well thought out plan, water supply and demand plan looking ahead 25, 30 years. Not many communities of this size have plans like that. I think if you look at the city of Nanaimo, they have a plan, but they have 100,000 people. So the plan that we have in place for the ERWS is really, really robust. It's just when it was made 10 years ago, they made some assumptions in there about climate change and population growth, and as Director Rogers points out, domestic water use. But a lot has happened since those studies were done, particularly in the area of climate change, as you've pointed out. So I think we've got a super good plan there that takes both communities' water supply and demand situations into account for the next 25 years. But we all know that the science around climate change in the last 5 years has grown exponentially, and we're a lot smarter about what we can expect. And I think, part of the reason, or, from a staff perspective, why we can support this is we've got a really good plan. We just need to make sure that it's still valid. And I think before we go off looking for other sources of water or anything like that, for long-term supply, not to be confused with what Heidi talked about earlier around emergency supplies in times of crisis, but for long-term supply planning, we have a great plan. We just have to make sure it's still valid with current science. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on what we've got there now. It's not like we don't have a plan. It's a very, very well thought out plan.
If I may comment on that, Mr. Walters, thank you for that. But I understand that the projections and so forth is all about capacity of the water treatment plant. And I understand that the capacity of the water treatment plant is excellent. It's as you say, it's at least a 50-year plan. And we have that. We also with the ability to expand that plant. That plant is not making water. The thing is that it's treating the water. But the thing is that I do not feel confident that the amount of water that we can assume is going to be in Arrowsmith Dam at the last week of August is going to be satisfactory enough to satisfy the demand that the partners are going to be requiring for. It's all about, I'm talking not about the water treatment plant, I'm only talking storage, water storage at this particular point. Expanding our water storage capacity, simple. That's exactly it. All the rest of it with the conduit going through to the plant, that's just a bonus. Maybe all sorts of other benefits that could be done as well. Recharging it and actually providing better Englishman River Department of Fisheries supply of water, which I feel has been lacking as well, which we have an agreement for our water license. But the thing is that it's all about water storage, Mr. Walters. So that so I'm not sure. Can you tell me that there is a study in place anyways to say that Arrowsmith Dam.
Excuse me, point of order,
Current-
if I might,
Yeah.
and not to interrupt Chair O'Brien.
Sure.
But at this time, I think we are discussing the motion that was on the floor. The aspect of the second motion is not on the table at this time, and I think it would be behoove us to sort of contain our discussions now relative to this motion. That this is looking at the resiliency study and the assumptions and so on that are made within the original plan for ERWS as a joint venture unit. So I respect your comments, but I would, as a point of order, I would hope that we could maintain our discussion at this point on the motion on the table.
Well, the comments are about, Director Rogers, the comments are about resiliency. And if you look at resiliency, it's a provision of providing for emergency, so forth. And when we have emergency situations, which is described in the climate change, Director Wallace is talking about resiliency as well. And that's what we talked about before. So that's where the resiliency is having sufficient water to supply emergencies. And that's what I'm asking for, is water storage to be included. And so if I was to propose a amended motion to include water storage as that might be more acceptable. Director Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. So I would just like to further clarify why I brought this motion forward, how it's connected to the current financial plan and the operational plan. And the scope of the motion is to the review of the assumptions used for the development of the 2050 plan. And I look forward to speaking about your motion after this motion. But the purpose of this motion is actually, it was not made from a bad news story perspective. It was made from a good news story perspective, in that our communities, RDN and Parksville together, have made significant investments to get to where we are. But it took a long time. And so now it's really important that we look back and make sure that we're still using the relevant information. So the framing of the motion does not add any costs to the operation of ERWS. It clarifies one of our approved spending package. I believe it's 2022-07, which is the resiliency plan that's already been approved by this board to move forward this year. And it further clarifies for the scope of that work that the assumptions made when the plan was developed be reviewed as part of the resiliency work. And again, when I speak to it being perhaps a good news story, and I appreciate the amendment, I think it's a great amendment for per capita usage. Area G was involved in the planning of this from the beginning, and potentially the capacity assumptions, which would feed the plant what it required to produce, included Area G, but I am unclear because we don't have the resiliency planning work done yet. And that's the purpose of my motion. So I think we almost have consensus on this motion as it clarifies an existing and budgeted for work package this year. And I'm wondering if we could proceed on the vote of this motion and then have the conversation regarding potentially the capacity of Arrowsmith, which may or may not be a conversation for this board or the Arrowsmith Water Service Board, respectfully.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. And to clarify, I like the motion. I like the motion I have from the start, but at the same time, I just want to make sure that we're including looking at the big picture as well. I'm certainly not against it as a step. Is a step in the right direction, to be clear. Mayor May.
I think we have to look at this. First off, we were informed that the study that was done before actually put the population of Parksville, the water supply, not the capacity of the treatment plant, but what between the river and the wells, it was based on 40,000 population. We're nowhere near that. We're not going to reach that for many, many years. The other part of it that as far as capacity goes, we use 600,000 cubic meters less water this year than we did prior to the treatment plant. That's an interesting fact unto itself, because now it's only representing 23% of our water consumption. But when you look at it and you say that the wells are now filled back up to the top, and if I could be corrected, but they're artesian, the water is actually right at the top of the wells and has the potential of coming out the top of the wells because we've got so much water in the aquifer in that area right now. So, you know, we do have a 600,000 cubic meter, in my mind, reservoir right there for our water. And that represents 50% water usage for the city of Parksville for a year. So we've got half a year's water storage right there built in. And I'm just not seeing why we're not, let's go and get all our facts and figures and numbers. Then we could probably have an argument. It may come back and say, hey, wait a minute, whoa, you're going to need twice as much as what you've got. Then we can look at water storage. But why would I look at anything else before I know what the numbers are? So that's where I'm coming from. And that's why I am going to support the first motion at this point in time. And I think we're just going around. I'd like to call for the vote, please.
Any
Call for the
comments?
vote. I need a seconder for the call for the vote.
Like to call for the vote?
All those in favor, as the motion is presented. Opposed? No, obviously not. Thank you. Carrying on, new business. Councillor O'Brien, this would be mine. That the motion that I'm proposing at this time is that the ERWS board directs staff to proceed with requesting proposals from qualified consultants to provide preliminary design options and recommendations to create highland water storage reservoirs for the ERWS. There's background as well, but I will wait after. That is my motion. Do I have a second? Do we have a seconder for debate? And that is precisely why I was having my comments before. Thank you so much. That motion doesn't carry because it did not receive a seconder, so we'll carry on with the meeting. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the public gallery at this point? Thank you. Do I have a mover and seconder to adjourn? Moved by Director Rogers, seconded by Mayor May. Thank you.
$11 o'clock. Pardon? Oh. No, I got a couple of hours in between.